this is Pete Madsen for Acoustic Guitar, and I'm here to present my weekly workout on making your own blues. A lot of musicians talk about finding your own voice on the instrument, and that can seem like a daunting task. How do I find my own voice? Well, if you borrow from the masters and you piece it together by using different phrases and licks and ideas from different players, it can sound like a unique blues. So in this weekly workout lesson, we're going to take examples from people like Robert Johnson, Mance Lipscomb, Big Bill Brunsey, and we'll also take some ideas from scales and chord shapes to produce unique 12-bar verses of blues in the key of A. So if you're not familiar with a 12-bar blues in the key of A, the first thing to know is you basically have 3 4-bar sections. The first 4-bar section is occupied by the 1 chord. In this case, this will be A or A7. Now, the typical way people will play in electric blues, and even a lot of acoustic players might play this first 4 bars, is an example 1. I'll play it right now. I'm playing this rhythm on just 2 strings, the 5th and the 4th strings, walking up the 4th string on the 2nd, 4th, and 5th frets. Probably heard this hundreds of times. Very typical way to play a blues shuffle in the key of A. Now, if you were Robert Johnson, you might play that same kind of rhythm a little differently. This is example 2. Notice I'm sort of keeping that same kind of shuffle swing feel going on in the bass, but I'm using these chords, an A7 and an A diminished chord. Robert Johnson would use these chords in songs like Preachin' Blues, 3220 Blues, Kind-Hearted Woman. It's how he would play a blues in A. So that first chord, that A7, looks kind of like a D shape, but it's on the 4th, 3rd, and 2nd strings with the open 5th string and the open 1st string. Then I slide that shape down 1 fret, add my pinky to the 1st string 5th fret, and I get the diminished chord. So as he plays this, notice how the rhythm goes from 1 measure of A7 to 1 measure of A diminished, back to A7, and he's going to halve the time, so only 2 beats, diminished for 2 beats, then he halves the time again, A for 1 beat, diminished, back to A7. Okay, so that's a Robert Johnson style blues in A for the first 4 bars. What about Mance Lipscomb, famous Texas blues player? He would play it something like this. So what I'm doing here is I'm basically playing what people often refer to as the long A chord. I'm barring at the 2nd fret over 4 strings. I've got the open 5th string, the A. Pinky is going to reach up to the 5th fret. And then I go down to the 3rd fret on the 1st string, which is A7. In the 2nd bar of that, I'm going to grab the 4th fret on the 2nd string, play the open strings, then slide back into that chord shape. Let me do that slowly. In example 4, I'm going to take basically partial chords that we call dyads, and I'm going to walk between 2 shapes of an A7 or A chord. The first full shape, this isn't in your music, but is based on like a bar chord E shape, but I'm only going to take two notes from that, the second string and the third string. And then I'm going to walk that down to the second fret where you have, we call it A shape, or a normal first position A chord that most people are familiar with. Let me play the example. This gives you sort of the illusion of movement without actually moving off of the chord. I'm just walking this shape down chromatically until I get to that next shape. It's a really great way to navigate between two versions of the same chord. Okay, for our week 2 examples, we're dealing with the next 4-bar section of our 12 bar. Which would be 2 bars of D, the 4 chord, and back to 2 bars of A, which is back to the 1 chord. In the examples that you're looking at, we're only going to see the 2 bars of the D chord. You can take from the previous week's examples from the A chord and plug those back in. You'll see how we can do that later on in the lesson. So your basic 4 chord from example 5 with the 2-string spread rhythm sounds like this. I'm just playing the open 4th string as I walk up this 3rd string from the 2nd fret to the 4th fret, 5th fret, back to the 4th fret. Work in conjunction with example 1 of our A chord. Okay, what would Robert Johnson do? In example 6, he would do something like this. I'm playing a D7/F sharp. You know your typical D7 chord, first finger on the 1st fret of the 2nd string, middle finger on the 2nd fret of the 3rd string, and ring finger on the 2nd fret of the 1st string. We don't need the 1st string in the sample, so I just take that finger off. I'm going to wrap my thumb around the neck of the guitar to play the F sharp note on the 6th string at the 2nd fret. And often Robert Johnson would kind of lay into that bass a little bit more, so you could hear him actually playing not just the 6th string, but 2 strings, the 6th and the 5th string. Example 7, this would be similar to what Mance Lipscomb might do. Fretting my D chord here, not as a full-blown D chord with 3 fingers down, but just the fretting the 1st string at the 2nd fret and the 2nd string at the 3rd fret, leaving my 1st finger free to do this little slur that Mance would often put into his song. At the end of that, he's moving back to the 1 chord, so you have something like this. So it's going from your D chord back to your A chord. Example 8, we're using the same chord shape that we used for example 6, just like Robert Johnson used, but this would be more in line with someone like Lightnin' Hopkins, where it would be a heavy triplet sound. You got this triplet going in on the 3rd and 2nd string, and you've got just a steady bass on the 6th string with that F sharp. Example 9 is going to go back to this idea of using these two-note chords, these dyads, and moving down the neck through them. So here's example 9. I started up here at the 10th and 11th fret, and again this kind of reflects the larger chord of an E-shaped bar chord at the 10th fret, but I'm only playing 2 strings. This time I don't do a fully chromatic descend down. I go from the 10th and 11th fret to the 8th and 9th fret, and then down to the 7th fret. Again, this is still reflecting the D chord. So I'm using these two-note dyad, which represent bigger chords. So I'm starting off on the 10th and 11th fret, which is representing this bigger E-shaped chord. I walk that down 2 frets to the 8th and 9th fret, then down to the 7th fret where I'm barring, down to the 5th fret, barring, and then back to the 1 fret spread till I get to what essentially is our home base for D7. I'll do that again. I should note that I'm using the 5th string as my bass note instead of the 4th string, the D. Why am I doing that? Why not use the D? You certainly could do that. That's fine. That would be fine. It just so happens that a lot of these players would use the 5th string. Robert Johnson, Mance Lipscomb would use I guess they like that lower bass note sound. It's still part of the chord, it's just not the root note of the chord. Then you'd be back to A. Okay, so for our week 3 examples, we're going to take the last 4-bar section of our 12-bar blues. And this is where it gets a little more interesting. The chords move quicker here. They go from the 5 chord, which is E, to the 4 chord, which is D, back to the 1 chord, which is A, and back to the 5 chord, which is E. We don't always go back to that 5 chord at the end, and you'll see in some of these examples we just stay on the 1 chord. But here's example 10 for week 3. Okay, so that's your basic 2-string spread rhythm, goes along with examples 1 and example 5. So that would be our typical electric blues kind of rhythm. But in example 11, this is what Robert Johnson might play for those last 4 bars. Okay, you don't need to fret that full E chord. You could just fret 1 string, the 2nd string, 3rd fret. Then your D7 F sharp, just like we played in the other examples. Now the typical Robert Johnson turnaround, if you haven't come across this might be new. So it kind of lays out like a typical long A chord. But what I'm going to do here is just plant my pinky on the 1st string 5th fret, and then have a descending bass line that moves from the 4th string 5th fret, 4th fret, 3rd fret, finally back down to the 2nd fret, and then an E7, which you can either fret a full chord or just 1 note. So slowly that turnaround, the last 2 bars, okay, how would Mance Lipscomb play turnaround? Well, like I said, they didn't always go back to the 5 chord right at the end. So in example 12, I'm going to stay on the A chord for the last bar. I started off with an E chord, and I'm doing a little hammer-on on that third string, very typical move. Going the pinky in there for the 7. The D7, again, this is one of those things that Manch would often do, a little toggle between the first and the second fret. And then this A chord, no turnaround, no going back to the E chord at the end, you would just return to the beginning. Example 13 is a bit of a hybrid last 4 bars. I'm starting off with something sort of Big Bill Brunsey-ish. So starting off with an E7 chord, let's just a little small dyad again. 3rd fret on the 2nd string, 4th fret on the 3rd string. Down to our D7 F sharp, same shape as we've used before. Do a little triplet pull off thing, lick there. I'm using my pinky to grab the 3rd fret on the 2nd string. And then this is a kind of like a John Lee Hooker's kind of boogie kind of groove. Play that whole example 13 one more time. For week 4, we're going to put it all together and create a complete 12-bar blues using ideas from the examples we presented before. Let me play through example 14 and then we'll break it apart. So I started off with my Robert Johnson A7, A diminished. But then I move into a Manch Lipscomb style A chord. And it sounds different. It sounds a little different, but they fit together really well. As I move to my D chord, my 4 chord, I'm going to stick with the Manch Lipscomb style. But now I'm moving back to my A7 chord. I see I'm right here at the 2nd fret. I'm going to use my dyads. Play those middle 4 bars again. Last 4 bars, start off with a Manch Lipscomb style. Then to our John Lee Hooker. So that's just one way I could piece these various ideas together to create a 12-bar blues. What you should do on your own is just try substituting different ideas, ones either in this lesson or stuff you know of. Think of all the different things you know of for A chord or D chord, E chord, and try to piece them together in a simple 12-bar blues. See how many different elements you can mix in without it sounding awkward or or strange. One little thing going forward, we take it to the next level. We have this idea of throwing in some single string ideas. Here's to take it to the next level example. So I started off with just a simple A7 chord, first position. Threw in a minor pentatonic lick. Back to my A7. I'm kind of creating a call and response thing here. The chord, 1, 2, 3, 4. The chord's the call. The pentatonic lick's like the response. Second one. And that's more like a major pentatonic. So you can mix these major, minor pentatonics, chord shapes, licks and phrases, you know, from various players and songs. Throw it all together and create your own 12-bar blues stew. Thanks for watching. I'm Pete Madsen for Acoustic Guitar.